Carnahan is a self-made man, rumored to be the richest man in Nixa.
He owns an aluminum foundry, one of the biggest businesses in the region, and he's got a big family to go with it.
They lived at the Carnahan compound, and yes, they did have foster children who were adopted. There was a communal living arrangement.
One Carnahan stands out, Garnett's pride and joy, his son Gerald.
Garnett brought Gerald in to learn a lot more of the business, the sales part of it, research and development. I think that he was grooming him to take over the business at some point.
But all work and no play makes Jerry a dull boy.
He had, I think, even by his own admission, run on a pretty fast track in southwest Missouri. He was a good-looking, obviously well-financed young man, and I think he had a clear reputation as being a partier.
By the time he hits his mid-20s, Jerry is poised to inherit his father's aluminum empire. But a good citizen, he isn't.
All he cared about was himself. That was pretty obvious. So, spoiled rich boy. He was not a warm person at all. He just had the coldest eyes. He thought he was better than everybody else there.
We all know the type. The overprivileged, self-inflated creep missing a human heart. By the time he's a young man, the dark side is calling to Jerry, and soon he'll be swimming in its worst excesses. Pride gone wrong, wrath for no reason, and an insatiable lust.
Gerald went to the mobile home of a former girlfriend who had a new boyfriend. Just walks into the bedroom and sexually assaulted her right while the boyfriend watched.
Given Jerry's prominent connections, the couple feels powerless to press charges against him.
Jerry was untouchable. He had the protection of his father, who, like any father, would protect his son, but Gerald was his favorite, so Gerald could do no wrong.
Jerry eventually settles down with a sophisticated businesswoman named Pat, almost a decade his elder.
She had waited a long time to get married. She was a beautiful and accomplished person. So when she finally did marry him, I think everybody thought that it would work.
At that time, it just looked like Gerald and his wife were just very happy.
But Jerry has a wandering eye. Almost every day, he leaves his office and heads to a little diner by the town's cattle auction. What he's hungriest for isn't on the menu. He's developed a yen for a 20-year-old waitress named Jackie Johns.
Oh, she was the it girl. She's kind of like the heroine of the town. She was pretty and had her whole future in front of her, and people were really proud of her.
She was very popular in high school, very outgoing. She was prom queen. She loved attention from boys.
Of course, Jerry thinks he deserves Jackie's special attention.
When he would come into the cafe, he would always want to sit in her section.
He wore expensive cowboy boots. He would tilt back in his chair and kind of watch her and just make her uncomfortable.
She didn't like it, and she'd say, "Will you wait on him today?" And I'd be like, "I don't like him. I don't want to wait on him either."
So obsessed is Jerry Carnahan. He offers the young waitress a job at his aluminum plant. Strapped for cash, she accepts.
He had told her that it was going to be a secretarial position, which probably didn't sound too bad to somebody who's working as a waitress, but she ended up working out in the factory, which didn't really fit her personality, so she didn't stay there long.
It's becoming very clear that Jackie has zero interest in Jerry, even if he is a big man around town. Besides, she's got a new boyfriend named Cody.
Cody was a nice guy. He was quiet. Jackie was the rowdy one. He was the quiet one, sort of like opposites attract.
That's when the phone calls start, with Jackie's best friend Dana often answering them.
I was staying the night at her house, and the phone rang, and I answered. He asked for Jackie, and I asked her who it was, and she told me it was Jerry Carnahan.
She could almost look out her bedroom window and see the tops of the houses where the Carnahan family lived. And she didn't want to talk to him. She never really explained why, but she was adamant. And she handed the phone to Dana, and Dana got rid of him.
Everywhere she goes around town, whether she's with company or alone, Jackie feels like she's being followed and watched.
She would make me go into her house and check to make sure no one was there before I left. Go in with her and make sure no one was there.
Jackie is on edge, scared that she may be in danger. And across town, even Jerry's wife, Pat, is growing fearful of his disturbing ways.
I think the marriage was just falling apart, and all the stress of him not being able to control it. I think the writing was on the wall about the marriage at that point.
People around town know Jerry Carnahan as a bully, a narcissist, an arrogant ass. He's a creepy stalker and a walking time bomb. And now, his threatening and scary behavior is coming home to roost. This guy has spent his life breaking the rules and getting away with it. Soon, he'll take his depravity to a whole new level.
Gerald Carnahan is used to getting exactly what he wants. And for at least one woman in his life, a normal summer night in Nixa, Missouri, is about to turn very violent. 28-year-old Jerry Carnahan is prowling the streets of his hometown, Nixa, Missouri. He's rich, he's bored, and he's dangerous.
He had parked his truck alongside the 7-Eleven, facing the front, so that he could see anyone who went in that store, including Jackie Johns, who did.
He was there basically conducting surveillance, watching to see who was coming and going from that convenience store.
His whole depraved life, Jerry's had people say yes to his every whim. But with Jackie, it's always no, and he's furious. Now his lust is infused with anger, and he doesn't just long for her body anymore. Now he longs to punish her for rejecting him.
We believe that he left after he saw her there, realizing she was probably going to be going home. And that convenience store is located about a mile from where she resided with her parents. And we suspect that what happened was that he feigned a vehicle breakdown.
The thought is that Jackie drove by, and just because she's the kind-hearted sweetheart of the town, gave him a ride.
At the point where she let him into the car was where things took a very sinister turn.
Jerry pounces and attacks Jackie. Then he rapes her and beats her to death.
I just think that those were impulses that perhaps he did not have and does not have total control over.
The next morning, a delivery driver comes upon an ominous scene.
The door was open, the light was on, the purse was in the passenger seat, but there's blood in the back seat, and there's blood smeared on the window, and they knew then that something was horribly wrong.
When police arrive, they open the trunk. There's no body, but they find the bloody murder weapon.
Well, I knew right away that this was certainly a very serious situation, that clearly, if she were alive, that she was probably very seriously injured.
But there's no happy ending in Nixa. 4 days later, some fishermen on Lake Springfield find Jackie's nude body floating in the reeds.
They performed an autopsy and documented all of her injuries, and as a matter of course, they did do a rape kit.
At that time, in 1985, we didn't know what DNA was, but the semen samples and the fluid samples that were taken were to basically help us with elimination of blood typing in the event suspects were developed.
Investigators are long on suspicion, but painfully short on hard evidence. But that doesn't stop the people of small-town Nixa from whispering about who the prime suspect is. calls pour into police. Several witnesses say they saw Jerry Carnahan's truck at the 7-Eleven. Another witness reports seeing Jerry's truck near the crime scene. Police bring him in for questioning and can't help but notice he's covered in scratches.
He told us a story that he had been involved in a very physical volleyball game the weekend before, and that was where those injuries had occurred. Claimed that at the time, other witnesses were placing his truck there at the 7-Eleven. He was in fact at home with his stepdaughter.
He felt he could get away with anything, that there would always be a family there to bail him out, that there would always be a family there to hire the best lawyers to protect him.
But the cocky rich kid loses his cool when officers carry out a warrant to collect pubic hair.
He literally went into a fetal position and began sobbing. It didn't last long. After they had collected the samples and he had rearranged his clothing, he went back to being the arrogant, somewhat swaggering Gerald Carnahan.
Still, none of the physical evidence conclusively links him to the crime. The charges against Carnahan are dismissed.
That was extremely frustrating, sickening.
But there's no escaping the evil that dwells within him. And over the years, it only grows more vile. He's drinking heavily, using a cocktail of prescription painkillers, and his wrath comes out in disturbing ways.
You know, he shot into the floor with a pistol. He threatened that he would kill his wife. He did hit her with a TV remote.
When police arrive on scene, he hurls a styrofoam cup of urine at them.
He would do bizarre things, but he got out. I mean, he wasn't in jail more than a night off of that incident before he was free again.
With his life spinning out of control, Jerry gets the urge to go on the prowl again. At 2 a.m. on a cold March night, he spots a pretty 18-year-old.
The next thing she knows, he's got her, and she begins to fight.
I think he is fearless about getting caught. That's just brazen.
Unlike Jackie Johns, this girl is lucky. She breaks free and runs to a nearby store. And before Jerry pulls away, a witness gets his license plate number. This time, the charges stick. And Carnahan is sent to prison for 2 years. But he still can't be charged in Jackie's murder.
We all knew in our heart that sooner or later that case was going to be solved, that it would be solved the next time there was a murder, and sooner or later people who are engaged in that kind of activity ultimately make a mistake and get caught.
But 20 years later, it's science that catches up to the arrogant rich kid. Nixa's most notorious cold case is reopened. A DNA test of the rape kit in Jackie's case shows that the likelihood of the semen belonging to anyone other than Gerald Carnahan is 1 in 6 quadrillion.
It's my understanding from the officers who effected the arrest that he cried, physically sobbed, and was extremely upset.
A jury convicts Carnahan of first-degree murder. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison.
I get emotional just thinking about it. It's just it's such a relief, you know? And I think that at that point you realize how much you'd actually carried all those years.
Everyone in Nixa is breathing a whole lot easier with Jerry Carnahan put where he belongs. Finally, the rich guy who thought he could get away with anything and nearly did.